Welcome to the Purposeful CEO podcast, the space for passionate, driven leaders who aren't just here to build a business, but to lead a movement. If you're here to make a real impact, to lead with purpose and create a legacy that lasts, then you are in the right place. I'm Emma Campbell, leadership coach, mindset mentor, purpose activator, and mama to two cheeky little munchkins. And for the past 15 years, I've helped small business CEOs scale their team without breaking their culture and unlock their team's full potential. And my mission has always been simple: to help those doing good in the world to do even more good and inspire belief in what's possible for you, because it's all so possible. Let each episode be your reminder to pause from the hustle and come back to you, your why, your purpose, your reason for why you started, to trust that inner knowing and to lead from that place, because when you do, everyone wins. Let's dive in. Hello. I have a very interesting one for you today, which I think will be really relevant and really helpful for so many of you, given what is going on in our economic environment, given where the world is heading. And that is a conversation that I've been having with a lot of clients, and that is to do with finances. And having a few clients in more difficult financial situations than ever before. And as you might know, the fact that the name of this podcast is The Purposeful CEO, most of my clients tend to be very purpose-driven, and when I say purpose-driven, I mean that they are in it to do the work that they're here for. They are here to make an impact. They're here to serve. They're here to drive results and impact for the clients and the customers that they serve. And yes, they know that the finances are very fundamentally important to whether their business can run or not, or survive or not. But ultimately, they're not naturally financially passionate individuals that are looking at the spreadsheet day in, day out. They're kind of keeping their finger on the pulse. They're keeping themselves informed and educated, but they're often not kind of sitting there, looking at the numbers all day long and really motivated by the financial side. They're more so motivated by doing good, serving, helping, being of service, all of those sort of things. And so I wanted to speak about a couple of my clients that are in a bit of a difficult situation and how I guided them through it, because I think this will be so relevant for so many of you, where perhaps profits are dropping, and numbers are not looking as strong as perhaps they have in the past. And one of my clients experienced a point where they really needed to make some significant changes to sort of drive a turnaround, a financial turnaround, and change ultimately the results that they were getting financially, as well as they needed to drive a change in the team's behavior and the team's focus, and where the team was really kind of focused on in terms of their performance. And some real key changes needed to occur there. And when I was having this workshop with this leadership team, was one of the big questions is, how much do we share with the team around where the numbers are at? Because, we don't want to freak them out. We don't want them to go into panic when it's probably unnecessary. Where do we sort of draw the line? Is it something that we just share with a couple of key leaders? Do we, include the team leaders of every team? And it's a really common question that comes up a lot. Hence, I wanted to do this podcast. And I think when it comes to the numbers, there's often a lot of fear and stuff that can come up when we start talking about revenue, about profit, about salaries, because numbers are so inherently tied to, often unconsciously, are often very tied to our identity, to our self-worth. We often have a lot of attachment to that our worth as an individual, our value as an individual, and how much we get paid. That's why often those like salary conversations can be really, really uncomfortable. They can bring up all the things. And, quite often can even bring out sometimes the worst in people, because it can activate a lot of that kind of ego within us, or those triggers around our safety and our worth. And whenever our ego is triggered, that's when you're going to get like the worst parts of people, particularly if it's not handled well. And that's why I wanted to share some tips on how to handle this whole piece well, because the truth of the matter is, yes, there's lots of fears around this piece. And I want to offer a reframe today on the transparency discussion around finances, and how, if you are in a bit of a pickle, a tight situation financially, regarding your revenue, your profit, your loss, whatever it might be, that I would offer you the reframe of seeing this as an opportunity. If your numbers are down, it doesn't have to be a time for fear and secrecy from your team. That actually, what I have found and what the research shows, that sharing some of this information in the right way with your team can actually be an opportunity for transformation and turnaround if done strategically, intentionally, and well. And I wanted to speak through a few of some of the key fears, I guess, that can come up when it comes to thinking about sharing some of the numbers. And, a lot of these are like, oh no, people, my team might freak out, or they just won't get it. There might be a belief that you've got, that this, the numbers piece, the financial side, that stuff's just private. Like, I don't want to share that with the team. You might be fearful that the team might start comparing, or resenting, or kind of like the more information that they get, if they don't understand it, that it might create confusion. Maybe you yourself don't even fully feel confident with reading financial data yourself. So it might feel really uncomfortable to share that with the team. Or you might even have a bit of a fear of like, oh, but what happens if this information gets out? Like, I don't know, what if competitors hear about it or whatever? Like, there's so many fears that come up. And I actually want to speak to each of these and offer a reframe, because I think the first one is probably the biggest one that most people freak out about and that stop them from sharing the numbers. And that's a fear that the team might freak out. That particularly if your numbers aren't in a really strong place, that it might create panic, a fear, maybe a lack of trust or faith in the business. Maybe people might even quit. Or that it might just create like unnecessary panic, or people might feel unstable, even though you know that you're going to be fine in the long term. And so you might be wondering like, oh, is it even worth me sharing? Because I know we're going to be fine, but how do I share that with the team? And the truth is, this is a really, really important piece. The truth is that this will be happening whether you like it or not. If the team doesn't have the information, there is a good chance that they are intuitively picking up on something going on, and that they are probably filling that silence with their own stories and their own assumptions, and that the unknown can often feel scarier than the reality. Whereas when you get the opportunity to really own the story, own the narrative, you can actually guide the message in a really empowering, action-oriented way. So you can say, yes, we had a dip. Here's what it means. Here's what we're learning, and here's how we're responding, and here's what you can do about it. Really empowering them with a call to action on the back of it. So that, yes, you've had the information, but you're also not letting it derail you. And that level of honesty can actually really increase psychological safety, because your team knows that you'll tell them the truth and they feel really connected to that. So that was speaking to the fear around whether the team might freak out. Really, what the research shows is that the opposite is true, and that the more that you share with the team, the safer that they feel and the more bought in that they feel. The other concern might be that you might just be like, oh, I'm just not sure that the team would really care or that they'd really get it. You know what I mean? Like, I just don't think they get the whole numbers piece. And I really hear this, and I think that's a pretty fair sort of concern to have, because in all honesty, most people are not financially trained. But what I have found, coming from someone who is not a naturally financially or numbers driven person and working in a consultancy, one of my first ever jobs, and I really did not feel confident at all with anything to do with numbers. What actually happened when my leadership let me in on the numbers and showed our entire organization where profit, loss, revenue, and everything was going, it actually became this really powerful opportunity to be taken behind the curtain in a really clear and simple way, where they actually taught us about what each of the different numbers meant, and they taught us the story behind the numbers, not just the actual numbers themselves. And what this did was absolutely transformational. So I noticed in myself almost immediately a deeper connection to the business. I felt more engaged. I was more driven than ever to contribute and to make a difference and to actually help turn those numbers around. And I actually started to think more like a business owner. And I wasn't a business owner at the time. I was a relatively new HR grad. Because what this opportunity gave to me was the ability to build, my commercial acumen or my business literacy, which ultimately drives greater engagement, greater buy-in, and like just better alignment to the business. So it can actually be like a really awesome opportunity to educate the team and empower the team with some of the numbers, rather than just being like, oh, they don't know and they don't get it and they never will. Really anchoring into that growth mindset. Like, this is just another skill. And the numbers of a business are the most important part of whether that business is going to continue running, right? So why not empower them with that information? Another one that I hear is, oh, I don't want to share the numbers. That stuff's private. Like, that's something that stays behind doors. And while I really hear that this is understandable, I also really believe that we can challenge this, because I think that can often be quite an old school mentality of like, where people didn't talk about numbers, people didn't celebrate, wins that they were having. It was like almost seen as like tall poppy syndrome, like, don't talk about the money, don't talk about how well you're doing. And sometimes I just wonder to myself, like, why? Why do we have to be so secretive about numbers? Like, why does it have to be something that is shamed or put down to speak about the finance? Like, I feel like there's so much shame around the financials. And I even remember, like growing up in my family home as a child, and wondering, how much do my parents make? How much does my dad make? How much does my mum make? And I remember really clearly, like, my parents saying, oh, no, we don't talk about that stuff, Emma. That's not something that gets talked about. And it was just kind of this thing that was kind of like put under the rug, and that it was kind of rude or uncouth or not very, I don't know, like sophisticated to talk about the money. And like, in a way, it just doesn't really make sense. Like, why? What is the benefit to that? And I guess another piece to that is, when it comes to sharing some of the numbers with your team, you're not sharing your personal financials, and you're not like sharing absolutely everything with them. You're just sharing what the business's performance financials are looking like. So it's not about like doing anything that feels too close to home or anything that feels like being personally exposed, but you're sharing the business performance, which then drives that collective ownership piece. Um, another fear sometimes that can come up is like a fear that you might not actually feel like you understand the numbers well enough yourself, and then so it can kind of feel scary to share that with the team. And first of all, I just want to say, if that is you, you are so not alone. There are so many business owners that I talk to that are like, oh my God, I get my accountant to tell me the bare minimum and whatever I need to like kind of get by. But I don't like to dig too deep into it. And if that is you, first of all, know that you're not alone. And sharing more of the numbers with your team could be a perfect opportunity to learn alongside your team and to be really open and transparent about where your financial acumen is. You could even bring in your accountant or like a financial advisor or your ops lead to help you kind of tell the story of your numbers. Like, you don't need to be a financial expert. You just need to be a transparent leader who's willing to sort of talk through it together. You know what I mean? And the final piece, or the final fear that sometimes can come up is like, oh no, what if we share the numbers and it all gets out? Like, what if everyone finds out what we're making? And so the first piece that I would say is like, oh, I've never seen this happen when you have a really strong, cohesive, engaged team that you trust and love. Like, yes, it is a fear, and is it likely to happen? I mean, I have personally never seen it happen. And the other piece that I would say is like, it's transparency within boundaries, right? It's transparency within trusted walls. So, most of your team, if you have brought them on and you love and trust them and they work within your team, they will understand how privacy and confidentiality works, right? And when you treat them like trusted insiders, they usually rise to that responsibility because people act like you treat them. So if you see them as trusted insiders, they will show up and they will act as trusted insiders. So you can be really clear about like your expectations here, and you can say, guys, you are trusted insiders and we really want to bring you into more of like the behind the scenes in the business so that we can empower you with what's really going on, because we want to show you the ins and outs so that you can see what it's like to run a business, and you can feel really connected to everything that's going on. And you can say, this information needs to stay in the team. We've brought you in here because we trust you, and we trust that you will keep this information confidential and private. And it gets treated just like any other sensitive data, which the team would already be looking at, right? And you might just start off just sharing enough to build that alignment and trust, see how it goes, and then you might build a little bit more and more as trust is built. And I think like it can be interesting as well because there's so many fears that can come up when it comes to the finances. And as I've shared before, what I have found is that the opposite is true. Personally, when I have been in my first consulting role, it was the moment that they started bringing me behind the scenes and treating me like a trusted insider that I really felt like we were equals, that we were part of a team, that they respected me, that they were really built, like bringing me in. And that was when I saw my motivation soar, my drive increased. I felt more bought in to the results. And I really started thinking about how can I drive more results to actually see more wins on the board. So it really can have a massive, massive impact, which I have seen personally, I have seen with my clients. And awesomely, the research says the exact same thing. So, what the research says about financial transparency, so if you're sharing some of your revenue, your performance metrics, your profit and your loss information, what the research shows is that this increases trust and engagement across the board for your team and for your employees. So, sharing your financials builds psychological safety and trust. So, when leaders are open about how the business is doing, especially the highs and the lows, employees feel more engaged, more motivated, more driven, more connected, more respected, and more like they're part of the big picture. It's often referred to as like open book financial management. And all of the research shows that it drives engagement and motivation. So there's some research by a business called The Great Game of Business, and they found that it drives 6 times faster employment growth and a 700% higher return on investment. I know Harvard Business Review also did a study, and they found that it increases employees' productivity. It boosts their sense of accountability and performance because it gave the team a clearer sense of direction and that real like measurable impact where they could start to connect their work with how that was translating to the overall organization's results, which just drives that sense of ownership. And the final really big benefit, and I think this is such an important one, which can sometimes feel a bit intangible, is that it creates a culture of ownership. And it kind of builds this business owner type mindset. So transparency shifts people from just being or feeling like employees to actually feeling like they're business partners. So they start thinking like business owners. They start making smarter. And this is a really key thing that I have noticed is that the more that the team is brought into the true costs behind a business, the more that they actually start making more cost-effective decisions. So they're not like, I don't know, looking at the most expensive type of technology solution just because it looks really pretty. They're actually looking at every little piece. They're like, all right, what are the costs here? What's functionality? They're like actually weighing up all those pros and cons for you because they understand what affects profitability. They've got that greater sense of education and buy-in. And there was a research done by Zingerman's and SRC Holdings that showed that when people understand how their unique individual actions impact the business, they're more likely to come up with innovative ideas to cut costs or grow revenue. So there is the research, there is the evidence, there is the proof that if you have been wondering whether you should share a bit more of the numbers with your team, the research really clearly points towards the benefits of yes, do it. Like there's loads of successful companies drawing on this research and really like harnessing these benefits, like this open door policy kind of mentality. Businesses that you would know like Canva, very, very well used technology platform. Atlassian, an Australian company, Whole Foods Market, Patagonia. God, Patagonia is just leading the charge in so many ways. Buffer, which is like a social media company, The Iconic, a shopping online app. So there's loads of companies that are leading with this open door financial policy. And what I would say is that if you're thinking about maybe giving it a go, you might be wondering like where to start. And I would say that there's a few key pieces to keep in mind if you're thinking about maybe getting started with it. So the first piece is that context is key. So you don't want to just be dumping numbers on the team because yes, that probably will create confusion, anxiety, overwhelm, a bit of like imposter syndrome, like, oh God, I don't understand numbers, all of that sort of thing. Particularly if you're doing it like for the first time during maybe more of those kind of challenging periods. The magic happens when the numbers are shared in a really strategic way stories are given, like story and explanation is given behind the numbers, and that you're really like thinking about the purpose and the intention behind this and doing it in a really intentional, thought out way. What I have found and seen is that like that ongoing education piece, that ongoing empowerment and storytelling piece can really help people interpret what the numbers mean and how they relate to their day to day. The other piece I'd say is that if this still feels uncomfortable to you, I would say start small. Start by sharing, if you're not already doing this, and I've got a business metrics dashboard template, which you are welcome to steal for free if you're needing somewhere to start. And it's just a really simple Excel spreadsheet. So send me a message on some of the details below this podcast episode if you would like a copy of that. I'd be so happy to share. But if you're not already sharing any of the metrics with your team, start by sharing 2 or 3 business related performance and productivity metrics through a dashboard of some form. And then after a while, after the team's kind of built up their confidence with that and their understanding with that, and you're feeling more confident about sharing the numbers, then you can show how those numbers actually convert to revenue. And showing like a few other metrics as well can be really helpful. So it's not just about productivity and performance, that perhaps you're also tracking like customer feedback or customer satisfaction or some of your impact scores, so that the team can see that, this financial piece is just one piece that fits into the greater puzzle of what it requires in order to grow and maintain a really sustainable business that is both purposeful as well as profitable, right? Because purpose drives profit and profit drives purpose. So you need profit to be able to deliver on your purpose. And the reason that you're making profit is because you are delivering on your purpose. So these two things are really, really interlinked. And I think it's important that the team sees that, and that like the finances aren't demonized or shamed, that they're just like, they're part of running a business. And I don't think there needs to be so much secrecy and there doesn't need to be so much secrecy about it, that we can be more transparent. And that's what the more progressive and modern organizations are doing, and that they're really seeing the benefits of that. Because the truth of the matter is that secrecy and keeping things from the team often leads to the team making assumptions. Because if you don't give them the facts, often they will make up their own stories about what the numbers are all about. And from my experience, the stories that they often tell themselves are quite wrong. Like if you're not telling them anything and all they're seeing is like lots of money floating in the door, they'll tell themselves that, this business is making so much money and they're hardly paying me anything. You know what I mean? Like they must be swimming in money behind the scenes. But what I have found is that when you actually start showing them the truth of the matter, and that actually like just keeping doors open, like, paying salaries, paying building fees, paying for cleaners and all of the resources, that just keeping the doors open requires the entire team hitting a certain revenue target. And that actually there's maybe not even a giant difference between revenue and cost. So they can actually see that the business is, trying to operate as leanly as possible in order to stay sustainable, in order to continue to do the work that it needs to do. So the more that you share that information with them, the less, fake stories they'll start telling themselves. So I guess like to sum all of that up, when companies, like what the research shows is that when companies share their revenue, profit, loss, data transparently, thoughtfully, with education and storytelling, that it has the greatest opportunity to create a culture of trust, shared responsibility, ownership, and aligned higher performance. When done well, it can actually turn your employees into strategic contributors, not just task doers who are kind of disconnected from the big picture, that they're actually like strategic partners in your business. So my experience is that when done well and when you start small and intentionally and strategically, that this piece can be giant and it can really transform your business financial situation, and just create like a much stronger culture overall of ownership, transparency, all the things. So I hope that this was really helpful. Again, if you want a copy of that free business metrics dashboard template to get started with your finances, I'd be so happy to share. Just send it through, and sending all the love. Thank you so much for listening. If you got value from this episode, I've got a little request for you. Either share it with a fellow leader who you know needs this in their life, or leave a super quick review. It only takes a few seconds, yet it helps us so much in expanding our reach and our impact and bringing on even bigger names onto the potty to then inspire your growth and your journey. I love and appreciate you so much. Thank you in advance, and I can't wait to see you next time.